Hey Grace Valley, welcome to week 20 of our chronological Bible reading. This week's reading, we cover a major transition in Israel's history. It's the end of King David's reign, and then it's the beginning of Solomon's reign. And so alongside these events, we also are finishing up the Psalms, and they give us a real powerful picture of worship, of trust, of struggle, and of God's faithfulness. But we begin in 1 Chronicles 29, where Solomon officially takes the throne after David. So scripture tells us that Solomon sat on the throne of the Lord, reminding us that Israel's kings were meant to rule under God's authority. God honored Solomon, and the people experienced peace under his reign. Then in 1 Kings 2, Solomon carries out the request of his father David. So David had warned him about some unfinished rebellion in the kingdom, and Solomon acted decisively. Adonijah, he attempted a second time to take over the throne. He's executed. Joab and Shimei, whatever his name is, are also judged for their rebellion. And then Abiathar, the priest, is also removed from office, which fulfills an earlier prophecy that said that Eli's household would lose its place of priestly leadership and that many of his descendants would die young, and eventually God would raise up a faithful priest in their place. So God's pointing already to Jesus. And then Solomon's kingdom becomes firmly established because he deals honestly with what threatens the peace and righteousness of Israel. So then we move to 1 Kings 3 and 2 Chronicles 1, and Solomon begins his reign, and he starts by seeking the Lord. He goes to Gibeon to offer sacrifices and worship, and there we see that he's demonstrating humility and dependence on the Lord. And so then God appears to Solomon, and he says, "What do you want me to give you?" And Solomon, instead of asking for riches or power or victory over his enemies, he asks for wisdom so that he can lead God's people well. And we see that God is so pleased with Solomon's selfless request that he grants Solomon not just extraordinary wisdom, but he still gives him wealth and honor and influence. And so we see through this that when we seek God first and desire wisdom over selfish ambition, God honors that heart. So we also finished up our reading of the Psalms this week. Last week, Victor did an excellent job walking us through the different styles of writing that are found in the Psalms. And so we see in this past week that worship was still the focus of David's Psalms. They also focus on celebrating God's goodness, his mercy, his faithfulness, his power. We see all the Psalm writers focusing on that, and they remind us that God is compassionate. He's worthy of praise. He's faithful to his people across all generations. And then we see also other Psalms for prayers of protection, for suffering, that people cry out to God when they're fearful, when they've been betrayed, when they're suffering, when they feel uncertainty. And God, he welcomes these honest prayers, and he wants his children, he wants us to bring every burden to him. We also see the authors wrestling with questions like, why do the wicked seem to prosper? Why does suffering continue? Where is God during hardship? All questions that we ask these days. But again and again, what these writers come back to is the same conclusion. God is still sovereign. He is still just. Ultimately, he will make all things right. So throughout these Psalms, we see a pattern. We see remembering God's faithfulness, trusting him during hardship, and then continuing to worship even in difficult situations. And so together, they all remind us that faith is not about life being easy or even pretending that it is easy, but it's about learning to trust God in every circumstance. So we ended this week's reading with an important turning point in Scripture. David dies. His reign comes to an end. Solomon becomes king. David has perfectly set him up for everything that he needs to do, and Israel enters a season of peace and blessing. And the important message throughout our reading this week is this: God remains faithful through every generation. He gives wisdom to those who seek him. He establishes those who walk in obedience, and he remains worthy of our trust and worship in every season of life. So that I hope that you will remember this as you go throughout your reading, as you continue to read every day, and as you go throughout your daily lives. I hope that is an encouragement to you, and we look forward to seeing you all on Sunday.